Innovation, I think, is really important as well. I mentioned about the kind of the overall collaboration, bringing stakeholders together, clusters, and I think that's a really important part of the offer.
The logistics industry is really flourishing in Liverpool. It's been really well received because of that import tax relaxation, the connectivity as well with the energy sector. So we've seen a little bit further into the Cheshire set, hydrogen really coming to fruition, right, and the suggestion that the Liverpool City region will be able to play into this.
The seed funding that the Freeports receive as well is being used to accelerate things like skills and parts of infrastructure that are required to help these ecosystems.
There is that UK law compliance point as well. So compliance and risk is a really important one for foreign investors and businesses coming over. They will still need to comply with UK legislation.
Really, they're open to a lot of industry sectors. There's not necessarily limitations, but I think it's really important to mention the relevance for the energy sectors, so clean and renewable energy, and also other areas of advanced manufacturing as well.
Hello and welcome to our Business But Better podcast, brought to you by Irwin Mitchell. I'm Richard Baigent, an international trade consultant working with Irwin Mitchell, and I'll be your host for this series. For those of you watching for the first time, this podcast is designed to bring you stories and advice from across the industry, helping you navigate the challenges and opportunities your business faces. In this series, we'll be discussing FDI, that's foreign direct investment, and what makes the UK such an attractive destination for overseas investors. In our last episode, we talked about the practicalities of doing business in the UK, what you should know if you're looking to Britain for your next venture, and the help that's available for entering the marketplace. Make sure you give this a listen if you haven't already done so. Today, we're looking at Freeports and the key advantages offered to businesses investing in the UK. I'm delighted to be joined by two experts who will explain what Freeports are, how they work, and how we can make the most of them for your business. Firstly, I'd like to welcome my colleague Pamela Chesterman, partner in Irwin Mitchell's real estate team, specialising in planning and environment. Pamela brings with her over 20 years of experience, having worked for numerous developers, local authorities and law firms, helping them achieve their strategic goals. I'd like to welcome Amy Lambert also, who's head of Freeports and Investment Zones at the Department for Business and Trade. Amy's work focuses on raising awareness to international investors of the advantages offered by this key strategic initiative to attract FDI to the UK. Welcome both, and thanks for joining us today. From Invest 2035, the UK's industrial strategy, due to be published in the spring, we can see that FDI is clearly a major part of the current UK growth agenda. So what part do Freeports play in attracting important overseas investment? Amy, let's start from the top. Could you explain to our viewers what a Freeport is, where they're located in the UK, and what industry sectors are most suitable for Freeports?
Absolutely. So Freeports are designated areas of the UK where special economic benefits are available to businesses. So at its heart, the Freeports programme is really about regeneration and bringing additional growth and jobs to, as the name suggests, port areas of the country, both sea and airports. And some of these areas have been maybe typically had changing industries over time, really good workforces, but seen potential decline because of that. But actually offer really, great potential for the future industries like clean, renewable energy, for example, and also have really key strategic importance for UK trade as well, and for businesses importing and exporting. So the programme is around each of these Freeports has got a package of unique benefits that it can offer to businesses coming in. It's not only about the sites, though. I'll come on to kind of specific policies on the sites, but it's really about a collective vision in each of these places as well. The clusters, innovation, industry sectors that are really growing, and the Freeports really help bring those stakeholders together around that vision and kind of, I guess, offer a bit of a soft landing for investors coming into these parts of the UK as well. So we've got 12 Freeports across the UK, and I'm pleased to say as of last week, they're now all open for business, right, because we had the last Freeport tax sites designated in Anglesey in Wales. So really up and running. All of those Freeports are now open for businesses to come into. So 12 across the UK. Of those, 8 are in England. So if I just quickly go through, we've got Teesside, Humber, Freeport East, around Felixstowe. We've got Solent, Plymouth and South Devon, Thames, East Midlands and Liverpool City region. That's in England. And then Scotland, we've got Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport and the Forth Green Freeport. And then, as I mentioned, Welsh Freeports have also just opened up, and that's in Anglesey, and the Celtic Freeports, which is around Port Talbot and Milford Haven. So lots of places to focus on, as I mentioned, all around strategically important ports, either sea or air. And so in terms of what those benefits are for businesses that come into Freeports, you've got a few key things. One of the main ones is the tax incentives available on key sites in each Freeport. And that includes things like relief on stamp duty, enhanced capital allowances and structures of buildings allowance, national insurance contributions, employer relief as well. So that obviously helps with the initial capital investment of a business coming into the UK, but also some of the operational ongoing expenditure as well. So that's obviously very attractive for businesses. Other policies that are included in the Freeport package, you've got the customs benefits as well, which this is an optional thing for businesses to take up, and it kind of helps simplify customs procedures if you're bringing in and out a lot of goods, if you've got a complex supply chain and you bring goods in and out. So that can help with things like duty deferral and even exemption, actually, if the products aren't going into the UK market but are actually being exported elsewhere, and a simplified declaration process as well.
So goods can come into the UK, be processed within a Freeport zone and then be exported out without actually falling under the UK duty laws. Is that correct?
Yes, that exactly, because in some cases those products aren't destined for the UK market. Obviously, if they are, then usual policies apply. But recognising that a lot of companies with a global supply chain are reliant on different parts of the world, really, in that process. So some processes might happen here in the UK, and then goods will go on to the next location. So those are two core benefits. Innovation, I think, is really important as well. I mentioned about the overall collaboration, bringing stakeholders together, clusters, and I think that's a really important part of the offer. But the specific innovation support as well available in Freeports. We've got something called the Freeport Regulatory Engagement Network, which enables businesses, gives businesses access to regulators to discuss new and novel products to help them be brought forward in Freeport areas.
Okay, so you would have potentially, if you like, a business that would then have a supply chain that would grow around it. So you end up with, essentially, you mentioned, did you say the word ecosystem?
Yeah, exactly. And that's certainly the vision for Freeports. And you can see it's already there, and it's already growing. We've got the first lot of businesses coming onto the key sites. And then through that, you've got the interest in the supply chain companies as well. But part of the reason these locations have been chosen really is because they offer that excellent potential in the existing clusters. I mentioned skills as well. Yeah. There's the seed funding that the Freeports receive as well is being used to accelerate things like skills and parts of infrastructure that are required to help these ecosystems continue to grow. So
the development over time of the Freeports make them centres of excellence and access to skills that are required to feed those industries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you very much. So what industries would be appropriate for Freeports? And you mentioned that they differ, the sectors to cover. Can you bring that to life a little for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Each of the Freeports has been chosen because it could demonstrate that, really strong clusters and areas of expertise and potential. Really, they're open to a lot of industry sectors. There's not necessarily limitations, but I think it's really important to mention the relevance for the energy sectors, so clean and renewable energy, and also other areas of advanced manufacturing as well. So the renewable energies and clean energy sectors, partly because of the role of ports in that transition for things like offshore wind, hydrogen, carbon capture. Naturally, the nature of the sites, some of them are directly on the port side as well. So that's really relevant and vital for businesses that need that for that sector. I mean, you've also, I mentioned kind of the changing industries of some of these areas, and you've got a really experienced workforce in a lot of these places that may have historically been more in the oil and gas sector, but now has the skills and the expertise to actually move across
So it's a transition
into new in those new industry areas. So we're seeing a lot of early success in that area in the free ports, and particularly looking at the east coast free ports in Scotland, for example, in the Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport. He's highly focused on the wind sector, amongst other things.
This is where there's a transition from the North Sea oil fields to now being offshore wind.
Yeah.
Right, I see.
And so the Freeport sites there are really being developed with that in mind, and the needs of the manufacturing sector to be able to create these really huge components and deploy them to the right locations as well. We've got other areas of advanced manufacturing as well, and particularly I think thinking about this, like the logistics elements of free ports, the role of the ports, the ability to decarbonise logistics and supply chains, as well as the customs offer, is also, we're seeing, is really attractive for other types of advanced manufacturing companies as well. If you've got components coming in and out and looking to streamline and potentially decarbonise your supply chain, that's a really good access point both into the UK market, but then also back out to other overseas markets. So yeah, I think that's a really important part as well. You can see around the East Midlands Freeport, for example, that's a really good central location in the UK. It's based around an airport rather than a seaport. But the benefits of that is you've got that really easy access to overseas markets, as well as the rest of the UK within a relatively short drive, or using the rail system as well.
And free ports and free zones that you see around the world, do they differ?
They do. The free ports, free zones, special economic zones, it is an internationally used term, and is an international model actually for attracting investments. So that's good in a lot of ways, because it means we're kind of talking the international language of overseas businesses. But it's unique in every place, and the UK model is unique as well, in the sense that we've got these key tax sites, so typically 3 sites per free port, and then you've got customs site, which could be taken up anywhere within the wider area. They're sort of located in and around the ports, and they're sort of hinterlands, nestled in and around these wider clusters, rather than one kind of big fenced off area that you might associate the model with in other countries. I think it's particularly important to say that with how the UK model works, you've obviously got these special incentives, but UK law legislation still applies throughout, as it would do anywhere else in the UK. I think there can be a misconception that businesses can come into free ports and not comply with those. They can act on their in the legislation of their home market, for example, or are somehow excluded from usual UK law, and that's absolutely not the case. Which is really to the benefit of the free ports, because it's one of the reasons businesses come to the UK.
Gives
for
credibility,
strong and credible and stable business environment and legislative environment as well.
That's great. Thanks very much, Amy. Pamela, from your experience, how are free ports benefiting businesses, and what's been the investor interest so far? I'm thinking perhaps if you could give examples, maybe they're in the public domain. I know that you're based up in the Liverpool area and have had some experience of what's happened up there. Can you just bring that to life for our audience? And what are perhaps the legal challenges that need to be thought about?
Thanks, Richard. And as Amy said, the real impetus for the Freeport has been that catalyst to really generate economic growth and businesses' interest in these areas. So my interest has been particularly with Liverpool City region, working and living in that area. And it's been really good that the Freeport status has been welcomed as greatly as it has. I know from experience from speaking to some of the project managers, the difficulty is really now getting the smaller businesses involved, but it's definitely been something that the large stakeholders, the logistics industries, the developers who can really see that benefit of growing their businesses that were already in the ports, as Amy mentioned, they've been able to really fly with their growth potential in those areas. So in the Liverpool City region, it's really helped incentivise the businesses' growth within the Wirral Waters and Liverpool Waters schemes. It's well within the public domain. Peel is a major landholder for the Wirral and Liverpool sides of the port, and they're the Port Authority. So they've really been able to hit the ground running, because Freeports, it feels new and it still feels like a lot of awareness has been raised, but it's been going for years. I remember reading it when it first came out, or the incentive was there. So these are things that have been in the making and have required a lot of concerted effort from the authorities and from central government. So the investment is still there, the push is still there from central government to help these areas. And Liverpool City region has definitely benefited from the investments so far, which has been then able to offset to some degree a lot of private investors. So I think you mentioned as well, Richard, how is this attractive to international businesses? Again, just looking at my closest example, because that's where I've got the relevance. The logistics industry is really flourishing in Liverpool. It's been really well received because of that import tax relaxation, the connectivity as well with the energy sector. So we've seen a little bit further into the Cheshire set, hydrogen really coming to fruition, and the suggestion that the Liverpool City region will be able to play into this. So the combined authorities' use of hydrogen-based highways networks and feeding into other combined authorities areas. So we've seen is it Freeport East, I think, Amy, where they've talked about hydrogen and feeding the hydrogen network in with there as well. Hydrogen is one of those really prime examples where Freeport will be the catalyst for hydrogen use in this country. It's something that foreign investors are really looking at. And others, I think it was America, was really interested to see how we were going to implement that. So I think it's definitely working. It's definitely something that, even though it still feels in its infancy to some degree, it's taken a lot of work, and it is really working in the areas where it's already in place.
Amy, any to add there?
Yeah, I'd really agree with that it feels like Freeports were first established in sort of 2021, so it has been going a while now, but it still does feel like early days, and we've really recognised that this is a long-term thing, and an FDI generally is quite a long-term thing. So I think we're at the point now where we're just starting to see those first big investments, and then, as you say, hopefully the smaller businesses will also start to come through more as well in these areas. So yeah, just look at a few examples across the country. On the really large scale, you've got things like the Sayer Wind monopile manufacturing. I think it's going to be the world's biggest monopile facility in Teesside. So that's a particularly large site that was available in Teesside. So it's worked well for that scale of company. I think that's, with the different stages now, around £900 million worth of investment that company based in Korea has invested into that area. But on the sort of slightly smaller scale, though still significant, you've got companies, Freeport East, for example. Asan Panel are a Turkish manufacturer of sustainable building materials, and they're entirely new to the UK. So this is their first kind of setup in the UK, and I think for slightly different reasons, because Gateway 14 is an entirely different site to the Teesworks site, is they found that as a really kind of supportive environment to make that first investment into the UK, the right sort of site for them, and the right kind of connectivity around it, plus there's obviously the benefits as well to that business. So you can start to see a real whole spectrum of businesses coming in, and for different reasons and different drivers. But yeah, the initial stage is there, and then I think now is going to be about building on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because we do a foreign direct investment report. Comes out sort of periodically, roughly quarterly. We publish within it a UK attractiveness index, so taking the top 50 locations throughout the UK to measure them across a breadth of different elements, infrastructure, access to talent, these sorts of things. And for the first time, we in November put proximity to freeports and investment zones, which will be a future podcast discussion. What effect does that have? And there was significant move up. Liverpool, mention it again, literally because you're here, and for those of you overseas, Pamela has a very strong Liverpool accent. Liverpool moved up something like 12 places in the top 50 simply because we put that measure in there to see whether there was a positive influence. And the new foreign direct investment report comes out later this month in January 25, as I'm speaking to you now. So it quite clearly is having quite a positive impact. Yes. Pamela, if we can come back to the point I made at the end there around things that companies should think about from a legal perspective if they're coming from overseas, typically speaking, what are the elements of law that companies need to be considering?
It's a really good question. And as Amy hinted to before, it will be important that even with the relaxations, for example, tax and allowances and reliefs that are there specifically for the Freeport, there is that UK law compliance point as well. So compliance and risk is a really important one for foreign investors and businesses coming over. They will still need to comply with UK legislation. So it's really important. It will cover things like company law formation if they're setting up a new UK-based company, if they're looking at complying with environmental risks for the sites. So even though they're in a Freeport designated area, there might be something specific if they're having a operations business there. If they're putting plant or machinery down, they will have to comply still with UK legislation in those areas. I think it's fair to say that the Freeport zones had envisaged some sort of relaxation in planning that would be brought through in what was called local development orders. I haven't seen any of those to date in relation to the port, but a lot of local authorities are still very open to not relaxing, but having very open discussions with developers in Freeport areas in order to incentivise those people coming in because of the weight that the Freeport designation is given to the area. So that has been really welcomed in absence of the local development orders that would have given that planning relaxation. So with that in mind, they would need to comply with planning and environmental legislation as well, particularly if they were setting up a business or a hub within those Freeport zones. It's also worth considering employment legislation as well, if they're going to staff those buildings or if they're going to have anybody working in England in the Freeport, well, Scotland and Wales as well, the relevant legislation, they would need to comply with that UK legislation here as well. As well as any sort of legal aspect of the import and export, whatever their goods were that they were importing and exporting as well, that would all have to be compliant with UK legislation.
So things like sales contracts, contract with suppliers.
Exactly. Yes,
You mentioned employment law, I guess immigration as well, visas and things like that. Those are typically things that a company from overseas would need to bear in mind,
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, cool. So Amy, what do you see as the future for Freeports in the UK? It's a fairly short question. What's the answer?
I think, in short, it is a very positive future. We've just seen from the autumn budget, the new government has continued to back the programme, which has obviously been great for the Freeports. And then now we've got the industrial strategy coming as well, of which the core sectors really align really well with what the industrial strategy sets out to do. All tax sites are now open for business. So there's all these places are now ready and ready to sort of welcome more businesses into those areas. So as we said, it's a long-term thing, and we're kind of relatively early on in that, but I think it's very has really great potential to kind of lead on to future cluster building, even beyond the longevity of the reliefs, because I probably should say as well, not only these tax sites limited, the space will be taken up in the fairly short term by businesses, but there is a kind of a window that will close in 2031 and onwards, depending on the time of the tax site designation. So I'd say for businesses looking and interested in this sort of area, now is a very good time, because the opportunity will be taken up by others as we go forward. So I think it's going to be a good next step for Freeports.
Anything you can tell our viewers about any new sites that are potentially in the pipeline at all? Not
under the Freeports programme.
Right.
So we're kind of got the 12 now, and they're all ready to get going. There's obviously investment zones as well, which I know you'll be doing another discussion on, which offers a slightly different opportunity. But yes, I think the key stage right now is those 12 free ports really getting up and running and getting those businesses into the sites.
That's great, thank you. So to bring this podcast episode to a close then, what support is on offer for companies looking to take advantage of free ports? Amy?
So there's lots of support available for companies that want to come into the UK and look at free ports. So from the Department for Business and Trade, we're here and available to help and talk to companies about the different options. There's also some really good sort of useful information if you go on the Expand Your Business website on great.gov.uk, which is run by the Department for Business and Trade and offers, you can get some bespoke information relative to your business. But I would also say each of the free ports is now set up and ready to kind of have those conversations, be it that welcoming front door really to a wider region and an ecosystem. So each with their own leadership and an inward investment lead as well, who'll be able to have those conversations. Each has their own website, so you can have an explore around the different locations as well. But by all means, DBT is here to help as well.
And we'll have those details at the end of the podcast. Superb. So Pamela, what advice would you give companies from overseas that are looking to the UK free ports as a potential to set up their businesses?
So I think it's the answer that you'd give anything, really. It's the key is preparation, making sure that you've got all the key advisors in play and prepared all your relevant documentation before coming over. So having all your applications, your permissions, your consents, having grant applications in place and understanding all your contractual arrangements and agreements and anything that might require compliance and risk management once you come to the UK.
So get your legal partners, professional partners involved early, I guess.
Exactly.
Super. Thank you. Well, thank you both for your expertise and thanks again for joining our panel to share your experience and advice. Finally, thanks of course to you, our viewers, for joining us today. In our next episode, we'll be looking at investment zones, how they benefit investors, businesses alike, and what the government is doing to support them. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our experts' advice. Hope you'll join us again for the next episode of our Business But Better series. Bye for now.